Last Saturday morning I went flying. The weather had been good all week, although a front went through Friday night. By Saturday morning it had gone, leaving a westerly breeze, scattered cloud, and excellent visibility. As usual in such conditions, I took off uphill on the northwest runway at Roach, and then, after liftoff, turned into the prevailing wind. Fellow Darwinists will appreciate the reasons for the turn. It gives me the lowest ground speed, best angle of climb, and best range of options should the engine stop. There's but one solitary telephone wire to avoid, and the westerly heading keeps the aircraft clear of those blasted wind turbines. Once clear of the turbines, I headed north, up towards St Briac Down, to film and fly an exercise. The impossible turn is a common, if slightly erroneous, name for an emergency turn procedure following engine failure after takeoff. The idea is the aircraft is turned left or right through 180 degrees and landed back on the departure aerodrome. The procedure works. I've done it myself for real, but it is not without hazard. First, to establish what not to do. Those two cat's whiskers marked in the centre of the windscreen are at 45 degrees. I drew them on with a dry board marker and a large set square. They're just there for reference. With approximately 15 degrees bank angle, the throttle closed, and the speed a few knots above the stall, I gently flew the aircraft around the turn. The turn took forever, in fact around 45 seconds, and there was a great temptation to try and reduce the rate of descent by pulling back on the stick. This is very wrong. Little wonder there's such risk of stall and spin. I flew this exercise 4 times. The minimum height loss achieved through 180 degrees was around 220 feet. The worst was 300. There is a better method. With the throttle closed and same gliding speed as before, I smartly rolled into a steep turn to the left, at least 45 degrees angle of bank. The result of this turn is very different to that of the shallow bank turn, and most importantly, the result is consistent. I flew this exercise 4 times, and I've flown it many times in the past. The height loss was consistent 100 feet at worst. No doubt part of that consistent performance is the time of turn, between 11 to 12 seconds. We all know that stall speed is potentially increased during a steep turn, although that increase is really based on loading rather than bank angle. Anyway, it helps remove the psychological feeling of wanting to pull the stick back to reduce height loss. Establishing safe procedures and practicing emergencies is good fun and should be done regularly. Those who don't want to practice emergencies should actually give up flying and take up Russian roulette. The first rule is to find a revolver. A few months ago, back in the winter, I made a film exploring the stalling characteristics of the Aeronca C3. I made that film partly to answer questions posted by commentators on previous films, and also because of a photograph that appears in Jack Jefford's book, Winging It. Jack Jefford, as well as having a very nifty moustache, was a pioneer Alaskan pilot, but before moving to Alaska in the late 1930s, Jack, with his brother Bill, ran a flight service out of Broken Bow, Nebraska. In January 1936, the Jeffords bought a brand new Aeronca C3 from the factory. Jack used the Aeronca for instruction, but in April 1937 he lent it to his friend Chris Hald. Hald owned his own Aeronca, but it was out of service following an accident. Unfortunately, While circling a friend's house too low and too slow, the Aeronca stalled and span. Jack Jefford watched aghast as it disappeared below the tree line. Chris Hall was alive when they pulled him from the wreckage, but he died soon afterwards. The Aeronca as standard doesn't have an airspeed indicator, and the sage advice at the time was to keep those wires whistling. Hall must have had everything inadvertently in the wrong place, as the Aeronca is a very difficult aeroplane to spin without trying. I headed back to Roach and practiced a glide approach onto the short westerly runway. I was down and off the runway in little over 100 yards. It was so enjoyable I had to go and do another.